We got Mike in Washington. You're on with Jenna and Matt. How are you?
Oh,
Hi, Mike.
hello. Hi. How are you?
All right.
Yeah, all right. How can we help?
All right. So let me pull up my notes here. I was trying to rephrase the actual question because it's not exactly what I wanted to get on.
Ooh.
So the thing I apologize. So the thing that I wanted to get in is because I'm a Christian, I identify as a Christian. When I read the Bible, I can see a lot of hypocrisies in there, and I can see there's a lot of back and forth. And so when I get into conversations with fellow Christians, they I wanted to know what is a good way to get what is a good example to get fellow Christians or other Christians to admit hypocrisies within the Bible?
Why is that your goal?
I apologize. I wasn't trying to interrupt anybody else. It's just that. Well, go ahead and answer Jenna's question.
Well, if that's not where you want to go with it, that's fine. But I'm curious. Why is that? Why are you trying to do that?
No, I think it's a great question.
Well, so when I read the Bible, if you're looking in Leviticus and they're talking about slavery, like Leviticus 25, how you can own other slaves, as long as they're not part of Israel. And then indentured servants and all of that for 6 years. And then after that, or 7 years. And then after that, if they get their own land, I talked with that about people. And they're like, oh, well, the Bible doesn't condone slavery. And so my thing is I can definitely read the Bible objectively, see that there are hypocrisies within it, still make my own decision to choose to believe in the God of the Bible. And still understand that there are these hypocrisies, that it's not perfect, and that it almost seems more, when you think about the God of the Old Testament, it seems more like it is a more human God, human in the sense that he's filled with rage, there's anger, there's jealousy, there's all these other emotions that are there, whereas the God of the New Testament is very loving and forgiving and just love everyone. And when
there's two gods?
Discuss that with fellow Christians. I'm sorry?
There's two different gods?
No. It seems like he had a, he changed his view, right? His thoughts on stuff. He was about genocide, and there were sacrifices and tons of other things. And then now when you go into the New Testament, it's very much love thy neighbor.
I'm so confused why you're convinced that the Leviticus part is bad, and you're trying to convince your friends that it's bad, but you're also trying to defend it at the same time. It's interesting to me.
This is why I laughed at the outset. Because first of all, you called me, and I will go ahead and declare myself as the king of using slavery against Christians.
Right.
To ask how to convince Christians to recognize problems with that, when clearly I've failed. I've stood next to four reasonably well-known apologists who all gave 4 different apologetics for slavery. And I said, well, you guys go talk it and sort it out. When you figure out what the one right answer is, you come back to me. But what's confusing to me is it's so obvious that the God character in the Old Testament is different from the God character in the New Testament. You recognize this, but you want to find a way to reconcile it. Why do you need to reconcile it? The Jews don't need to reconcile it. They just say Christianity is not true.
Right. And so I feel like when I talk to other Christians about it, they try to flip-flop on that subject. They're like, okay, well, if we're taking the New Testament God, and we're going with Jesus, he is the way, the truth, the life, and that's what we're trying to do.
But that Jesus is still fine with slavery, and so is Paul.
It sounds to me like that's what you're doing, though.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It kind of sounds to me like that's what you're doing.
What reason do you have to think that any version of the God character from the Old or New Testament is actually real? And why, just to add a little mud here, why, if that God is real, are you having to call a bunch of atheists to talk about how to convince other Christians of the thousands of different denominations about which of the gods is real?
Well, it's more not about proving that God is real. It's just about understanding the hypocrisies within the Bible. I feel
I don't care. So you might as well be, Mike, if you don't care whether or not it's real, Mike,
I'm sorry?
if you don't care whether or not the God is real, what difference it make if there's hypocrisy in the book? There's hypocrisy in all kinds of books. You could be saying, "Hey, I'm a Christian, but let's talk about why there's hypocrisy in the Bhagavad Gita, or why there's hypocrisy in the Quran." But
Are your
instead,
friends
you're talking about
pro-slavery?
what's that?
Are your friends pro-slavery? Is that why you're so concerned about this?
Are they? No. They're not for slavery. But they try to use, I feel like, Christianity when we all talk about it, or like my friends and I or other individuals talk about it. They like, I can wholeheartedly say that I believe that the God of the Bible is real due to my own personal experiences, supernatural, whatever you may call it.
That's what we want to talk about. We want to know why you believe it's real.
I mean, this is so you're convinced that it's real, and yet what?
Sorry.
So you're convinced that wholeheartedly, because of experiences you've had, that the God of the Bible is real. And so I'm interested in hearing what that experience is and why it convinced you, but also why it is that you are now, because of personal experience, convinced that a God is real, and yet somehow unable to get answers from this God in a way that are of any use to you. And so when you go through the Bible and you decide that the slavery passages aren't really representing God.
Right.
And you might go through and you might say, you know what, the anti-homosexual passages, those aren't really representing God either. Or the ones about eating shrimp, those aren't really representing God. And you can go through and you can make a list and you can decide for yourself which ones don't represent God. But if that's the case, aren't you just inventing the God that you believe in? Why isn't your God giving you these answers?
Like, don't you realize that you're the one ultimately that's picking what to believe and what not to believe? You're the one that's doing it?
Absolutely. And I'm all about understanding that I'm cherry picking the Bible to my own sense to understand it and to go into that. But when I speak with other Christians myself, like I they don't acknowledge the cherry picking.
Okay, so you're more honest than the rest of them. But if your honesty doesn't get you to so like, I guess, and I know you didn't call in for this, but can you give us one personal experience that convinced you that a God exists, so that I have some, I don't know, something to assess here?
Yes. So, and again, this is my own experience. I can realize that there are definitely another option as to why it was. When I was younger, my friend and I, we were skateboarding and we were walking home, or skateboarding home from the park. And we were on this massive four-way intersection where it was in Phoenix, Arizona, where I lived. And it was like just pretty much like open land, no fields, no nothing, no houses, no nothing, just fields. When we were going past a little bit on the one, on I guess like the northeast corner, there was a row of houses where we were going to. When we got to this intersection, we saw this beautiful woman, like she was in white attire, like just gorgeous, like radiant woman. She was walking opposite of us. So if we were going north, she was going west, or I guess parallel to us, whatever you would want to call it. So we were going that. We were on the skateboards. We were like, oh man, she was beautiful. We should go and see that again. So as we decided to turn around, as we were doing that and coming through, a car who was coming the opposite direction of us, or in the direction, coming from the direction we were going, like lost control, went into a house, crashed, and had we not turned around, that would have been us. That would have been hit instead of the row of houses. And when we went to try to find that woman that we were looking for to begin with, she was gone. Like we couldn't see her. We didn't know what was going on. So I attributed that to an angel who looked out for me, or like got our attention and kind of brought us out of that.
Sure. So you had a close call.
I understand.
You had a close call and you decided it was an angel.
Yeah. And while I understand like that is illogical when it goes into it, I believe that because of how I was raised, or everything that I went into Christian-wise going into it,
okay.
I believe
if you had been raised differently, do you think that you would have reached a different conclusion?
Perhaps. Absolutely.
Okay.
Like,
so if the primary criteria about the conclusion you reached is how you were raised, what does that say about what you understand about the actual event?
I mean, yeah, it definitely shapes my worldview for sure.
So have you ever heard of the butterfly effect?
Earlier today.
Like, you know how it's, yeah, basically if you just kind of rewind, you can see why everything happens, right? Like this caused this, which caused this, which caused this, right? Right. And so if you want to look at anything, you can look at any accident that happens within the time frame that you leave between here and work and say, oh, if I had left this much earlier, or oh, if I had left this much later, then I could have blah, blah, blah. You could find tragedy anywhere you look. It just depends on what you're looking for. And so I understand, like, yeah, that could have been you, but it also could have been somebody else if it was a millisecond later. It also could have been somebody else if it was another millisecond later, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why didn't the woman in white stop the car accident entirely?
And why didn't she tell you she's an angel after? Say hi.
I mean, if God's going to provide you with evidence, why not provide you with evidence rather than just making it a suspicion? So like, you're not even necessarily convinced that God exists. You just seem to have a suspicion that God exists.
And then this is where it definitely gets hard, because I have the suspicion, and then I feel like I have the conviction that he exists. Even though, like, rationally, when I think about it, like, I can look at stuff and be like, oh, there's definitely not proof, but there's.
Why doesn't God clear this up for you? Why doesn't God clear this up for you? If God is real and your belief in him is real and your devotion to God is sincere, then you should just be able to ask God to demonstrate this so that you're no longer confused or concerned.
Right. That would send up warning signs for me.
Definitely. I feel like it goes back to the choice of given free will. Like, when we're out here, my personal belief is more deistic,
Mike,
stuff out.
Mike.
Yes.
Do you also believe in Satan?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. And so does Satan absolutely know that God exists? Has Satan been in God's presence?
Yes.
And Satan rebelled against God?
Yes.
So your free will argument's a load of crap, because God could definitely confirm to everyone on the planet that he exists and is real, and people could still exercise that free will to not believe, correct? Or to not worship.
Absolutely.
So there's no reason for God to not answer your questions. You're just coming up with excuses for God. Why does God need you to come up with excuses for him?
I feel like if he is a truly omnipotent being and omnipresent, everything, like, and all powerful, like, he probably doesn't. It's just, if anything, like, he wants us to go off of faith, which I understand.
Why?
A load of crap anyways.
Well, yeah, because is there any couldn't I believe any religion based on faith?
Absolutely.
Can we say it feels like anything?
I mean, it just feels like I'm desperately trying to ask questions that get us closer. And from what I get from your story is you had an experience, a close call. You decided that it was an angel based on how you were raised. You haven't bothered to put any of this to the test, and instead you've come up with excuses why this shouldn't or can't be put to the test, because it somehow violates free will even though it doesn't, or God is so omnipotent that he doesn't care. But if you believe that God cares and loves people, do you think that God wants me to know he exists?
My personal belief, and I'm sounding like an idiot as I speak, and I apologize. My personal belief on it would be that God would want everyone to come to know that he exists.
Okay.
If we do not, it's kind of like, and I don't want to be like cavalier with, or like nonchalant about it, but like, he's like, whatever, it is what it is, kind of a thing.
So he's like Trump.
Like, it's like,
it is what it is.
He stole that from me.
Sure. Essentially.
So if you think that God wants everybody to know he exists, why didn't he prepare you better to come up with something that could demonstrate it to us? Why is it that through my entire life and through the lives of many other people who've lived over centuries, people have lived and died their entire lives, and not been presented with any evidence. You have thousands of denominations amongst many different religions, all making different claims about God. And God seems to be completely absent, unable to come in and clarify any confusion, unwilling to come in and offer any evidence. Is that more consistent with a God that doesn't fucking exist or a God that does?
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say if you're going at it from that point of view, it's more consistent with a God that doesn't exist.
I said doesn't fucking exist, but I'll excuse you because I'm a little freer with the F word.
May I ask you a favor?
Absolutely.
It sounds to me like you're on an honest journey trying to figure this stuff out. It sounds to me like you feel like it's real, but it doesn't really make sense. And so you're willing to open up your mind and ask different people their perspectives. And that's exactly what I did. And I applaud you for that. But I would ask that you pay attention to when you give reasons for things that begin with "it feels like," because "it feels like" can mean something completely different from me to you, let alone the billions of other people there are and have been. And that has nothing to do with what is actually true. What is actually true is why we have developed the scientific method, is to try to figure out what's actually true, because everybody feels like something different. So whenever you base your entire worldview on what feels like it's true rather than what you've investigated and learned about, I would just recommend that you investigate further.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I can definitely, like, if I were to take emotion out of it and look at it like rationally, I can definitely see, oh, there's hypocrisy here. This would kind of like turn me off of it. Just like if I were to look when I read into Mormonism or Jehovah's Witnesses and all of that stuff, like when I read it, I'm like, oh, okay, this obviously seems false, or looks to be false based off of everything. So
it's not obvious to everyone
within Christianity as well. So I definitely see that within the Christian faith as well. I just find that I can identify and say that there are these hypocrisies. And the reason I wanted to speak with Matt specifically is because I know he wanted to be like, you were correct me if I'm wrong, you were a pastor and you were looking to...
I was going to be a pastor. I decided against it. Look, I'm in agreement with Jenna, Mike. I'm in agreement with Jenna that you seem to be somebody who's sincerely seeking and looking for stuff. By all means, I'd recommend hanging out in the Discord and talking with people. Mm-hmm. But also you can email tv@atheist-community.org. And maybe you can call back in and we can have like a number of different conversations, kind of narrow in focus. But my takeaway is always going to be the same. And it's until something changes. And that is, I don't see evidence that is sufficient to warrant belief in a God. And when you present your reasons for believing, not only do I not find them sufficient, I find them, embarrassingly bad. Not that you're stupid for doing it. Everybody does this. Oh my gosh, I just had a close call, thank God. Or that car almost took me out. Must have been a guardian angel. Or this happened or this happened. It's because we're trained to think that way. And instead, every time you want to credit God with doing something wonderful for you, take a look if there's another way to look at it. Like, hey, did God intentionally cause that car to crash into a house in order to teach me a lesson? Because that God's a dick.
Or could I find another reason that the car crashed into the house? And maybe it's the brakes went out. Maybe because somebody was lazy who knows?
But we got to move on to a couple other calls real quick before we end the show today. But I appreciate Mike, and give us a call back, and keep searching, keep looking for answers.
Thank you
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have a good day.